Today's lesson is going to get us into another way that we can represent data. So far we've talked about it in circle graphs. And if you look at the first example there of what sport you play, we could easily turn that into a circle graph simply by adding all these together, figuring out what the total is, and then figuring out what percent each section is of the total, and creating the circle graph from there. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to take a look at the fact that we're talking about data and some other things that we can figure out from the data. Data is a collection of facts such as numbers, words, measurements, or observations. Two ways you can show that data set. The first is you can put it inside these curly brackets, which if you were going to write it yourself, looks like this. Or you can simply just have the numbers there. Sometimes you'll see them where you do not have the brackets at all whatsoever. But if you take a look at this, here is the information on who plays the specific sports. And this is the data set of all the people that play those sports out of who was surveyed. So, simply just an example there. We're not going to use that beyond this little bit today. One thing we are going to look at, though, is the vocabulary. So this is where if you have a highlighter handy, make sure that you use it. If you do not have a highlighter handy, this is where you can just use your pencil or pen and underline what we end up highlighting. So first vocabulary word is the word range, and it is the difference between the lowest and the highest values in a set. So when we talk about the range of the data, that's simply what's the biggest value, what's the smallest value, subtract them, and that's going to give you the kind of spread of the data. So to do that, we subtract to the highest value minus the lowest value. So that's how we find it. The mean is not like being angry at someone. The mean is the average of the numbers in a data set. So the key there and what's bolded for you is the word average. What we're trying to do in these three here is we're trying to find what we call the measure of center. So like what's going to give us the best idea of our data set. Typically when we talk about the mean, like we talk about a class average of something. So like when you get to middle school and you start getting A's, B's, C's, D's, and you get graded on a scale from 0 to 100, they'll start talking about like the class average on our test was like an 85. So that tells you what we're doing is we're averaging all the numbers in a data set. So how they do that is they're going to add up all the test scores and then divide by how many numbers there are. So if you take all the test scores, add them up, and divide by how many there are, 85 is a class average. So that's like on average, people were scoring an 85% on the test. It can be used other ways, but that's a nice, easy way to explain it to you in terms of the mean. Now, sometimes that's not the best method, so we use the median, which is to find the middle number in the data set. And it's all about kind of what I said was measure of center. Center is kind of like the middle of something. So you're trying to figure out the middle of your data set. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to order our numbers from least to greatest. It's important for us to put them least to greatest because you want to be able to see them in the order that they are numerically. And that's going to help you find the middle number, and we'll talk about the way to do that in the actual example. So if there's one number in the middle, that's your middle number. If there is not a middle number, so you'll get a situation where you might have two numbers in there. You're going to take the middle two numbers and add them together, and then you're going to divide by 2 to find the median. And again, we'll take a look at an example together where that's going to happen. All right, the last one is the mode. Sometimes you're going to find a pattern where you have one number that just kind of shows up over and over again. And so the mode is to figure out which one happens most often. So think about it this way. Mode, most, both have that O sound in there. So you're figuring out which one happens most often. So figuring this one out, again, you're going to order them from least to greatest. And then you're going to look to see which number or numbers appear most often. So looking to see which ones appear most often. All right, let's get into doing some practice on this stuff and figuring out what the data is for these. All right, so if you take a look, the first two examples that we're going to be doing, if you go side to side, are to figure out the range of the data. Then we're going to look at the mean, the median, and the mode, just like we had up here in terms of order. Before we get started, though, talking about the mode, thinking about that, there can be some times where, and you may be asking yourself this right now, like, what happens if you don't have a number appearing most often? Like if you look here, okay, all of them appear the same exact amount. There's not one that shows up more than, excuse me, others. Well, we get into a situation where best place to write would be here. If no number shows up most, we call that situation a no mode situation. So there is a chance, like you see here, a number does not show up more than once. You end up saying, well, we have no mode. So, and that's entirely possible because it's happening right here. But you just simply say no mode for that data set. All right, take a look at the first one. Find the range for the data set. Well, to find the range, we need to subtract the highest value minus the lowest value. So my highest value in all of this is 9. Minus my lowest value of 3. And 9 minus 3 is 6, so my range is 6. Okay, and if it helps you to underline them so you see them, go ahead and do that. Okay, this one happened to be already ordered least to greatest, but if you take a look at this one, we're finding the range. It's not in order. Okay, we do not need to place them in order to find this. If it will help you, please do it. But we do not need to. So find the largest value, our highest value in that data set. Okay, and it's 11. And then you're also going to find the lowest value, which is 0. So you're going to take 11 minus 0, and you get 11. Pretty straightforward, easy subtraction, especially with lower numbers like that, or smaller numbers like that. All right. Find the mean for the data set. This is where we start to average them out. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow these steps here, add them together, and then divide by how many numbers there are. So we'll walk through this one together. You do not need to order them or anything like that. This one happens to be ordered, but you're simply going to go 2 plus 7 plus 9 plus 12. All right, go ahead and add them up. Remember, if you would like to, you're allowed to use a calculator, but you definitely can do this adding without the calculator. You should get the answer of 30. Okay, if at any time you want to work these out without me kind of spoiling it for you, go ahead and pause the video and then hit play, and then I'll be giving you the answer there, but I definitely recommend working these out. That way you get the practice on how to do it. All right, that's step one. We add them all together. The next thing we need to do is divide by how many numbers there are. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers in my data set. So I'm going to do 30 divided by 4. All right, go ahead, plug that into a calculator and check. Again, pause if you need to. 30 divided by 4 gives us 7.5. So the mean of our data is 7.5. Now notice 7.5 is not one of our data points, but the average, when I take everything together and average it out, it works out to be 7.5. So like the center of that data, according to this, is 7.5. All right, our next one here. Again, doing the same thing, we're going to add them all up and then divide by how many numbers there are. All I'm doing right now is simply writing them out as I see them, because it doesn't matter that they're in order from least to greatest or not, because all we're doing is we're adding them all up and then going to divide. So go ahead, add those up, and pause the video, and then check back once you're done. All right, adding all of these up together, we get 78. And then we're simply going to take that value, 78, and divide it by how many data points there are in our data set. And so we take a look, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces of data in that data set. We're going to do 78 divided by 8. Go ahead and do that right now. All right, when you do that, you get 9.75. Now I know this can be a little confusing that we're getting stuff that is not even a value that we have in our data set. Remember, we're just finding the average of this stuff. That example I gave you earlier about test scores being 85, you very well could get in a situation where like no one scored an 85 on a test, but that's still the test average. So we're just figuring out what the kind of average of all of that information is with the mean. So there's a good chance that you could have a value that has nothing to do with any point in that data set. That's simply just the average. That's the middle, the center of that data. All right, next what we're going to do is the mean. And I will say this, at any point, feel free to take a little break. We're going to take care of these 4, and then we'll practice this stuff in class tomorrow. All right, this is the one where it matters that we order them. So we're going to put them in order from least to greatest. The way that I like to do this is I don't like to cross off the data in case I make a mistake and need to go back and fix, especially using pen. So I simply take my smallest one, and I put a little check mark on top of it. And I keep going through looking at all my data to make sure that I'm including everything without missing any values. And the reason that you're using a pencil is in case you miss something, you can go back and plug it in, no problem, without missing something. All right. Least to greatest, all my values. And what it tells us that we need to do is find the middle number. So that was a pretty not great, vague explanation. So what we're going to do for that is this. I'm going to find the middle number, which means I need to come in from the edges to do that. So I'm going to cross off my lowest value, my highest value, next lowest, next highest. And I'm going to keep doing this back and forth until I'm left with one number in the middle. So out of this data set, 15 is that middle value. And it's as simple as that. You just line them up in order and you start crossing off side to side until you find what's left in the middle. Now we said step 3 up there for median is that sometimes you may not have a single middle number. That's over here. So let's take a look at that together. All right, don't let the larger numbers get in the way of everything. We simply do everything the exact same way. All right, so I'm going to go least to greatest. Taking a look here. That's my smallest number, 51. Put a little check there. Okay, next smallest is 54. Next smallest is 57. 58. 59. 60, 62, and 65. All right, same thing. I'm going to start lowest, highest, lowest, highest, lowest, highest, and now I'm stuck. So really what's happening here, my median is like right there. And it's not the comma, it's what value is smack dab between those two. So to do that, what we need to figure out is I need to figure out what number is right between those two. So the way that we do that is we actually find the mean for these two numbers. So what that means is this. We're going to add them together, 58 plus 59, and we get 117. Okay. Just like we did with the mean, we add up all the numbers, and then we're going to divide by how many numbers there are. So I'm going to take 117 and divide it by the two numbers that we added together, and that's going to give me 58 and a half. Which, think about it, makes sense. What's halfway between 58 and 59? 58 and a half. And it works out quite nicely that these numbers are only one apart, but if you do this for numbers that have like a bigger spread between them, like if 57 and 62 were the middle two numbers, you would still find exactly what's halfway between those two values. So it's kind of like combining what we do here into what we do here to figure that out. All right, final two things that we're going to take a look at, and then we're done with this stuff for today. So we want to find the mode for the data set. And remember, mode is the one that happens most often. First thing we're going to do is order them from least to greatest. There's nothing special with this other than we're going to put stuff together. So right now, like, I can already eyeball this, and I see a few 6s, I see a couple 3s, I see a couple 9s. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to put them all together. That way it makes it easier to see how many there are of each. Rather than do this whole, like, oh, there's one here, two here. You just simply put them in order. 3 there, 3 there. I got a 5. 6 of these got, or 3 6s. And 2 9s. Now the reason we put them in order is you can easily quickly see, okay, I've got 2 here, 3 of these, 2 of those. Well, the one that's happening most often, it's those 3 right there. So the mode is 6. 6 is occurring the most out of all of this. All right. So remember, we talked about this. If there's no number that shows up the most, like up here, we would say there's no mode. So like this has no mode for the data set. This has no mode. This one does have a mode. Okay, and as we take a look at the next one, there are some special situations where you can have more than one number that is your mode. So let's go through this one together. Put them in order from least to greatest. So we've got 25, 25. Checking them off as I go, so I know I've counted them. Okay, next one's 31. Then we've got 33 that shows up twice. 34, 37, 39, and lastly 42. Alright, so I want to figure out which one happens most often. Well, I got 2 25s here, 1 31, 2 33s here, so I'm noticing both of these have 2 of them, 34, 37, 39, and 42. So we end up having a situation where you have 2 numbers that are occurring the most. Each of those happen twice. Every other one only happens once. So we end up with 2 modes. Now, I will say this. Just because it happens multiple times does not automatically make it a mode. If each of these values happened twice, so everything shows up twice, there's no mode because one is not happening more often than the others. But in this situation where both of these are happening, you would end up with both of these being the mode. Let me actually show you real quick what I'm talking about with the other one. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a situation where they're all occurring multiple times. You can write this down if you would like to, if this will be beneficial for you to see. You do not need to. So all of these are happening twice, multiple times, with the exception of 39, because Mr. Teitsma forgot the second 39. So there's the second 39, out of order. Okay? But all of these happen twice. And even if there was only one 39 there, it really wouldn't matter because all these other ones are on the same there. So when we take a look at this, all of these happen the exact same. We call this situation no mode. Doesn't matter that they are all happening multiple times. There's not one single value that occurs more often than the others. All right. We are going to spend a lot of time practicing this stuff because when we start talking data and statistics and all of that, and especially moving forward in your math careers, we are going to be doing this stuff quite a bit. So we're going to spend the time talking about this, making sure that we understand how to solve for everything, understanding what it all means. So make sure if you have any questions, you come with them tomorrow, and we will do some practice together. See you then.